Yeah, we're live. Got some other guys going on. How are you guys doing? It's Sunday night. I just got back from seeing Fast and the Furious 27 or whichever one is out now. I was not a fan. And I'm actually a big fan of the series. I don't go to movies to watch a movie like that and expect them to be 100% true to guys that are dedicated, like tech guys in the automotive industry. I know that that's not it. I go and I suspend the disbelief and say, yes, they can jump buildings and they can do all that stuff. And I want to be entertained because I was always a huge fan of like all the James Bond stuff. And then the Fast and the Furious kind of started out kind of as a car thing and then kind of went that direction, and I'm all in. But this last one was just not for me. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys have seen the movie, did you like it? And if not, which one did you like better than that? Which one was your favorite? You guys can let me know what is your favorite Fast and the Furious movie if you guys have one. Tonight we are going to talk about turbocharging, and specifically, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, and this is more so when we're talking about LS stuff, although the video that I just put up was on 5-liter stuff because I ran a 306, small block Ford with a heads cam and intake on it. And then we ended up putting nitrous on it. And then we ended running it under boost with a single turbo setup from the guys at HP Performance from back in the day. And then also I did compare that to a 363 stroker. So it got me thinking. I get a lot of questions, and primarily on the LS side. Well, hey, when should I do? Jerry's in the house. When should I do a stroker? And the most common thing is a guy has a 4.8 or a 5.3 and says, well, should I do either a big bore version of that, turning the 5.3 into a 5.7, going out to near 3,900 on the bore for the 5.7, or when should I put a 4-inch stroker crank in it? And then you can do that with the stock bore size or 10 or 20 over, or you can go all the way out to the 3,905 stuff and make it into a 383. But when should you do that? And actually the answer is different for the 5-liter guys than it is for the 5.3 guys, I think. I do like the stroker stuff. Like on the 5-liter applications, we showed obviously in the video that if you just add boost to a 5-liter, and especially if you do it to one that has decent cylinder heads and they need a camshaft, just like an LS, it runs better with any kind of camshaft. And so the 5-liter needs a camshaft. And if you have heads cam and intake on the 5-liter and then you add boost to that, obviously really good things can happen. In fact, I think you can get to the point where you have to start worrying about block strength with those before you have to worry about going to a 347, although I do like the 347 stuff. What I like even more than that is doing that same thing to a 351, because I think when you do that to a 351, you have a great deal more block strength. And not only that, you have a lot more power potential because it's already bigger. So, hey, Gerardo, thanks for all the LS videos. Thank you for supporting the channel. But the 351 is good, but and that's more comparable to an LS. So when would you need to go from a 351 to either a 393 or a 408 stroker? And it's the same question for when you need to go from a 4.8 or a 5.3 to a 383 stroker. Now, I would be more inclined to step the displacement up on a 4.8, because when you step the displacement up to a 5.3, let's say, or even a 6.0, you can have a combination that's going to be a lot more responsive, which I like. So a 4.8 that's why we always talk about those, saying that, hey, it's easy to put too much camshaft in them, then they're not going to be responsive. If you pick a 5.3 from the wrecking yard instead of a 4.8, it will be more responsive all by itself. But the key is with the 5.3 and the 351 to some extent is if you go in and pick on the LS, you don't have to pick cylinder heads. It's a good idea on the 351, or just get the GT40 heads from the Explorer. But if you put a cam and springs in it and you do that head upgrade at least and have a decent intake manifold on it, you can have a good combination. And you don't need to go out to a 408. If you add boost to that, your starting point can be 400 and something horsepower. So you can see it as you start to multiply that, it's fairly easy to get to fairly big numbers. And it's the same thing with a 5.3. People ask all the time, should I go to a 383? And usually the answer is no. I'd be actually much more inclined to tell people, yeah, make a 383 if you're putting it in a heavy vehicle. And if it's NA, I would be much more likely to recommend that as an NA combination than I would as a turbo combination. And here's why. if you take a 5.3 and you take a 5.3 that has a cam and springs in it, and you add boost to it, you can already make a ton of power. If you put 1,000 horsepower turbo on your 5.3, you can make 1,000 horsepower. You don't need the 383 to help you make that 1,000 horsepower. It's already going to do that. If you've put a cam in the 5.3, you're going to be able to get that obviously at a much lower boost level. And I would almost always recommend a camshaft upgrade on a 5.3 with a turbo to get there. Now you can run lower boost levels with the 5.3 and a stock cam and still make good power. Like the most common thing that we show is, hey, here's how to do 600 horsepower with just boost on your 5.3. And you can certainly do that. And lots of guys do, because then you have stock idle and stock drivability. It's just with the turbo, you have a ton more torque and obviously more horsepower. So if you have a stock 5.3 that makes, in our case, they typically make, when we run them on the engine dyno, a stock 5.3 will make somewhere around 350 horsepower when we run it the way that we run it. And then getting it to 600 is not really a big deal. It's all that it takes is boost. I do usually like to put valve spring in it because we almost always put valve spring in them, because when I put them on the dyno, we don't normally just run them stock. We're already thinking ahead and putting another camshaft in it, or multiple camshafts in it, and different intake manifolds, and sometimes different cylinder heads, sometimes different intercoolers, whatever else we're testing. So we almost always do that, but it's certainly possible just to run that. So when somebody says, should I do a 383? I almost always tell them, no, you don't really need to do that, because to get to 1,000 horsepower or even less, if you're only trying to get 600 or 700 horsepower, there's no reason to do that. I mean, if you want to dramatically improve the response of your 600 horsepower turbo motor, you can do that, but you're probably going to make, like when we put together a 383 with a cam, you're probably going to be already at 500 horsepower. So you're kind of most of the way there anyway, and the boost isn't going to get you very much farther. Now, obviously, if you want to go beyond that, you can certainly do that, and the stroker will always help. The other thing that you run into with a 383 on an LS compared to a 5.3, and you run into the same problem with a 6-liter, and that's if you size your 1,000 horsepower turbo. On the more powerful and bigger NA motors, you're going to have more back pressure. So you might actually be able to, if this was your goal, to make a little bit more peak power without going to the stroker or without jumping from a 5.3 to a 6.0. If you have unlimited turbos, like when we run twin S475s, or if you were to run twin S480s or something even bigger, and you were to run that and you're looking to max those out, then the added displacement of a 6-liter, the added NA power output, all of that stuff can come into play and help you out. But for most of the applications that we deal with, and for most of the questions that I get, they're all going to be in the 1,000 horsepower or less range, and most of them quite a bit more than that. I know that guys that are out there racing are doing, way into the 4-digit stuff, and that's fine. But a lot of those guys are even doing 5.3s. Maybe they'll hand port the heads, they'll put a cam in it, they'll put springs in it, they'll put headsets on it and good gaskets on it. And then they go out and all you have to do is just keep turning the boost up. If you have more turbo and it's still fairly efficient at 20, 25, 30, 35 pounds, they just keep going up, and you can keep making power as long as all of the rest of the things obviously will withstand that, as long as you have enough transmission and you have the right converter and you have the right suspension set up so that you can put that kind of power to the ground. Because let's face it, when you start getting into these 4-digit and up power levels, and especially when you get into 4-digit and up torque numbers, you're talking about putting a lot of power to the ground. That becomes more and more difficult. You have to have lots of tire and suspension geometry, and all of that stuff has to work for you to be able to even deal with that much power. I mean, if we consider that if you have a 1,000 horsepower or less motor, which is very common, that's easy 8s. So, I mean, an 8 is never easy, but it's certainly way more power than you need to get the thing into the 8s. And an 8-second car, is very, very quick. On the 5-liter side, like I said, with a 351, same thing. If we have a 700 horsepower turbo or an 800 or 900 or 1,000 horsepower turbo, On a 351, I don't think I would recommend going to a stroker. A stroker will certainly work, and just like with the LS, it will make the thing more responsive. It will make more power NA. So any power that you make under boost will happen at a relatively lower boost number, but it doesn't mean that it's going to limit you. If you put an S475 on there and that's 1,000 horsepower turbo, or a VS7875 Gen 2, that kind of thing, if you put that kind of turbo on a cammed and headed 351 with a heads, cam, and intake on it, you can make 1,000 horsepower. You don't need to make it a 393 or even a 408 to get to that power level. That's all fairly easy. You should spend more time maybe chassis dyno testing it and tuning it to get it to work right. And then, as I'm sure a lot of guys have found out, that when you, everybody has to have 1,000 horsepower because 1,000 is the new 500. So everyone has to have this big 4-digit power number. But do you also have the matching transmission and converter and drive shaft and rear end and tires and axles and all of those other things? What people normally find is they can make the power, and then when they make the power, whatever the next weak link is in the rest of the thing, in the rest of the transmission and drivetrain, that thing breaks, and then they fix that, and then they find whatever the next thing is, and then that breaks, and so you keep replacing all of these things. It's like I said, the nice thing anymore, it's both a blessing and a curse, is that it's easy to make that kind of power. I mean, you can miss by quite a bit and still have, you can have 4-digit power numbers pretty easy. But those are my suggestions on the stroker stuff, and why part of the reason why I wanted to do that video on the 5-liter stuff is to try to compare how easy it is to get to boost, or how easy it is to get to a certain power level with just boost or boost and other minor mods on a 5-liter. And the same thing with an LS, because most guys, and I pointed this out in the video, when they're looking to do this, they're not going, okay, look, I absolutely have to have this power number and I don't care what it costs. If we all could say that, that would be awesome. But not very many people I know can actually say that. What they say is, what is the least expensive way for me to reach my goal? And as long as you're realistic about the goal, and make sure that you are, don't say, I need to make between 1,000 and 1,500 horsepower. Well, the chasm between 1,000 and 1,500 horsepower is a lot. And people just throw around these numbers, and they're kind of ridiculous. But if you have a car and you decide, okay, I want to run 8, you go, okay, I can do that with 1,000 horsepower turbo if all the rest of my things are right. So here's what I need. Here's the power number I need. And then you can kind of backtrack from there. So you don't need a stroker, I think, for 1,000 horsepower and less on a 351, really, or a 5-liter. And boost is almost always the way to do it on the cheap, because we can go to a wrecking yard, we can get a motor, whether it's a 351 or a 5-liter or a Dodge, whatever your preference is, and then you can make that so that it will handle the kind of boost and power level that you're talking about. And once you do that, fairly big numbers are possible. For you to build, for instance, if you went to the wrecking yard and picked up a Dodge Magnum and said, okay, I want to make 600 horsepower with this, doing a 600 horsepower NA Dodge Magnum would be a fairly expensive proposition, because you need to change almost everything on it. You probably would need to build a stroker like a 408 or something. You would need really good heads to support 600 horsepower. You'd need a good sized camshaft that's not going to be as streetable probably as you would want it to be, even if you made it out of a 408. The 408 would be, with the camshaft, would be more streetable than a 360, because you'd have to spin that thing a lot higher to make 600 horsepower. You're going to need, like a single plane intake manifold or some kind of short runner EFI intake manifold, or you could just do it with boost and not very much boost. If you put a cam and springs in it, it would work out fairly well. So that is my discussion on when you need a stroker motor, when you need to increase displacement. And that works with just about anything. If you can apply that to K-Series Hondas and B-Series and almost anything that we test. It's a lot easier to get to somewhere, to whatever you decide your desired power level is, and don't set it as an infinite number. As much as possible. That's not a real number. So set a power level, decide how you want to get to it, and then figure out what the least expensive way is. And that's usually with boost. So let's see what you guys got going on. Please do more Hemi videos. A lot of people don't understand how much 500 horsepower is. It really is. If you get a guy that knows how to drive and he's got 500 horsepower, he can do some really good things with that. You're not putting 1,000 horsepower down off the launch. No, not unless you have a one heck of a converter. Please tell all the shops to start taking crypto for payment so I can buy my LS7. Latest Engine Masters episode 331, small block Chevy running 8,000 on a budget. I don't know how much of a budget that motor was, but they did go to 8,000. Can you test oversized ports and small stock valves versus regular sized ports and big valves? Why would you run either one of those combinations? I don't understand why you would try either one of those. Both of those are bad. I mean, I don't know why you would mismatch the head like that to try to figure something out. What are you trying to figure out there? Can you do some Euro stuff, an N54 or even an inline 5, 2.5 VW? The problem is always is hooking it up on the dyno. Dodgy, I was in the middle of watching the video when I got the notification. I think you seem pretty sharp, so I think you probably know the direction that thing is going. You can make 500 wheel horsepower with a stock intake to pan 5 liter with boost is what you're talking about. I'm certain. Admiral, I'm going to run low 7s, the high 6s as the end game. The car will be done when it runs faster than a 699 with a 9 and a couple extra 9s after that. Boost is a measurement of the amount of the size that does not fit. I stroked my Pontiac to a 468, running a 5-tech and a 78 turbo on E85. Your Derriere dyno says that it's north of 1,000 horsepower. Have you been in a 1,000 horsepower car before? And the other thing that's can be misleading about that is if you have a big motor like that and it makes a lot of torque, it can feel like a lot of torque, and maybe it is 1,000 foot-pounds. 1,000 horsepower is a little harder to tell. But 17 pounds on a decent 468 that has fairly good flowing heads and a camshaft, I don't think should be unreasonable. Turbo or supercharger for an LS1 Corvette. I think you're packaging a turbo on the Corvette. It'll be much easier for you to package superchargers, whether it's a centrifugal or a Boots or twin screw. Minden, Nevada. A 699 with a 9 and a whole bunch of other 9s after it is a sub 7 second run. Can't wait for the Gen 6 454. I know, me too. Andrew, that's the thing. A 302 will be better than a 289. Best piston for a Gen 5 454 for a boost, and should it be bored? You can do both of those. Most guys want to bore them only because then they can obviously have clean bores. So you can go 10 or 20 or 30 over, whatever you need to. And there's lots of good pistons out there. JE makes good stuff. Wiseco makes good. There's a ton of good stuff out there. N54 has adapters so you can run Ford Trans and a 9-inch. I don't care about the 9-inch. We care about adapting it to the dyno. Talk about the J series engines. I do want to run a J32 or a J35. Those would be good. Yes, Johnny, that's probably right. The first inline 5-cylinder that I would probably be an Atlas. It will. I think it bolts up the same way. I think that the bell housing, the adapter that we have from Mark will work just fine. I don't know about I'm fairly sure that our Mega Squirt will run it. We would probably have to do a new harness though. John, one of your other videos compared intakes. From what I understood, the stock LS3 was good. Building a 408 NA, is it worth it to buy the Fast for 10 horsepower? I don't think you would get 10 horsepower from the Fast over the LS3. So I think you should stay with the LS3 on that application. Bernard, what's up? Richard, could you please tell my daughter Haley that you like BTS? What is BTS? So I can finish this live stream. I learned a lot. I do, Haley. I do like BTS. Well, you have to tell me like secretly whatever that is. Replacing the TBI and my 90 SS. I like those. I have a 5.3 with a sloppy stage 2 and a dormant LS2 intake. How much power can I expect to make with ported 706 heads? It depends on who ported them and how much they flow and all of that. I've seen some ported heads that did hardly anything. I mean, didn't change the airflow hardly at all, and didn't change the power hardly at all. And I've seen some that change it a lot. What injection system would you run? I've only ever run a couple. I've run Fast. I mean, I've only ever tuned with Fast or Holly, and now I've done a little bit with the Mega Squirt. So I'm not the guy. I'm not a tuner, so I'm not the guy to recommend that. I can tell you that all of them that I've used have allowed me to put in the right air fuel and the right timing, and so the motor is going to make the same power if you do that. The other things that you need to look at are: is it intuitive? Is it easy for you to use? And that's something you might only be able to do. And also, does it have enough data logging or inputs or outputs or for the things that you need for your particular application? For what we're running on the engine dyno, it's actually fairly simple. .500 horsepower at the tire, NA, small block Chevy with heads, cam intake. Achieve that, or should I look at a stroker? Also, I don't think you're going to get that from a small block Chevy like a 350, because that's going to mean you're going to be up near 600 horsepower flywheel, and that takes a real dedicated build to do that. It's not impossible, obviously, if you take a look at what they did with cup motors, but I don't think you want to build one of those. I already have some 40-1 heads, so I'm debating on turbocharging a 440 or going with a 505 in NA for the street. What do you think? For an NA motor, I would pick the bigger for an NA application, I would pick the bigger motor. I'd pick more displacement. As I said, I would pick a stroker for that, because you're just going to make a lot more average power. But not if you're going to restrict it with a stock head. If you have good heads like a trick flow or something, then you can supply that, then it's good. You don't need the 505 over the 440 if you're going to add boost, because like I said, if you have 1,000 horsepower turbo, a 440 would allow you to make 1,000 horsepower, and then you don't have to spend the money on the stroker stuff. Richard, have you ever driven 1,000 horsepower plus car in the wet? I have not. Went for a drive in a 555 blown Camaro and seemed less than impressive. In the wet, it probably would be not fun. I can remember my dad had a SS396 El Camino, the 375 horse 396 with a 4-speed in it, and getting onto the freeway, if he nailed it, it would go sideways in the wet. So, and that was hardly any power at all, relatively speaking, compared to what people have now. I have a 5.3 with a sloppy stage 2 cam and a dormant LS2 intake. If you have headers and everything's tuned right, it's going to be north of 400 at the flywheel. It's probably going to be, if I remember right, I'm thinking that was like 430 or something like that. Thoughts on a 408 small block Mopar with Edelbrock Victor heads? I've never tested the Victor heads on a Mopar. I don't have a lot of experience with those, so I really couldn't tell you. Did you miss the L67 3.8 liter Big Bang? You did not. Julius is in the house. What do you think this cam is designed for? 234, 247, 646, 635, 113. Is it, what engine family is that? I'm not sure that that cam, like for an LS, I don't know if that cam would fit the factory piston to valve clearance. It's got a lot of lift. I would be a little worried about stability. I've got a weird question. What spec makes the most difference in a cam made for a VVT motor? Are you talking about separating lift and duration and LSA and all of that? You can't do that. You can't just pick one because it doesn't, cams don't do that. Just need rain tires and throttle control. I've done a lot of road racing in the rain and I really like it. I would rather not do it with 1,000 horsepower though. Why not advise them on the STS rear mount for the Corvettes? You can do that. Can you drop your email one more time? I can. AOL.com. Yes, Killerbreed 16. There you go. Richard, I'm about to put twin 70s on my 5.3. Already cam and springs, turbo 400. What kind of power do you think it will make? I don't know. Depends on how much boost you want to run. And I don't know what cam you have, so I don't know what you're starting with. It would just be a wild guess. So let's say 10 million. What is a stroker? That means a bigger displacement motor. A 1,000 horsepower and 275s. Yeah, that would be, you would have to learn how to torque manage basically, and you do that in a number of ways. One is the way that Mike is talking about is ramping the boost in. So you get real familiar with your boost controller. So do you have a GT45 knockoff turbo? Thanks, unit never makes over 20 PSI at idle. What you should do is, what I want you to do is take the, disconnect the oil line to the turbo and take the turbo off so you're not spinning it, and then start the car and idle the car and see what your oil pressure is. Because if you have your oil, if you have your oil pressure plumbed in, your oil pressure gauge plumbed in after your turbo, you might be reading that. So take a look and see if it goes up if you're maybe feeding too much oil to the turbo. What cam to put in a Gen 2 LT1 383 all forged assembly, power adders later down the road? Talk to the guys at the guys at TPIS. They can steer you in the right direction. It depends on what kind of power output you want. Does it have ported heads? Yeah, the oil pressure should go up with RPM. It shouldn't stay at 30 pounds. How about a cam shootout video? I have lots of cam shootout videos that are up. I don't know why you'd shape anything other than round for the pistons. I mean, I've seen oval pistons back in the day for the Honda stuff, for the motorcycle stuff. Any help on a base timing table on a Terminator for 78, 75, 53 on E85? Do you have a video for it? No, I'm not a tuner, so I would be not the guy to help you with that. I don't, when I run stuff, I'm only looking at the wide open throttle stuff. So if anybody has any help, and I've never run a Terminator, I've only run HP and Dominators. I have not run. It's not a 351 Windsor oiling issue. It's an issue on your motor. It's not inherent in all of them. We don't have problems with a 351. The parts 314. You have to check with a cam manufacturer to see if they can do that. But I thought somebody on eBay on YouTube had done that. I thought somebody had put the LS heads on a Windsor motor. Have you done any experiments on the Gen 2 Ram V10? Nope, I have not run a V10. AFR 195 heads are really good. The NSX had oval pistons? $2.5 thou is fine for the clearances. Do you have one of the oil plugs out? Like the ones that are right behind the cam retaining plate, if it is a late model hydraulic roller one? $10.93 on your 72 Ford. Nice. 370, 706, Summit SS, Sloppy Stage 2, Trailblazer SS, log manifold, 85102. That's a good size turbo. Who tunes all your setups? If that's directed at me, I do all the tuning on the engine dyno, but I don't do tunes outside, or I don't tune street cars. I don't do any of that. Running at wide open throttle, like getting the thing to idle, is very easy. If you start them up and they have fuel and they have timing, the timing can be 10 degrees or it can be 30 degrees when they start up. It will idle just fine. The air fuel can be 10 to 1 or it can be 14 to 1, and it will idle just fine. And then from there, it's easy to just go, okay, click, 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 click. I can make the air fuel be whatever I want. I can make the timing be whatever I want. And then all I have to do is transition from that, transition to whatever our starting load point is. Let's say it's 3,000 RPM. So as it's transitioning and you can watch the little bubble go up, I just have to make sure that there's not too much timing as it does that, and then that it has the right amount of fuel. I can make that, if it's a turbo motor, for instance, I can make that all 11.5 to 1. Too much fuel. So we'll do like stationary loads. Come on, connection. Come on back to me. So as I was saying, what we'll do is stationary loads. I'll do it. I'll make sure the roll-in's okay. We'll make sure that it has no timing in it, and then I can start playing with air fuel and go, okay, I need to take some fuel out of here and make this to be 11 to 1 or 11.5 to 1. And then what I do is tune the whole. We'll run it from 3,000 to 6,500 and make sure that the air fuel is what we want it to be. And then once that's all safe, then I start adding timing to it. It's fairly simple. How is the Atlas 4200 coming along? I just need to get back down there. I think that the heads are done. AFR 195 on a 383 is the bee's knees for a very torquey. Yeah, those work good. The guys at West Tech have a 372 Dart short block with AFR 195s on it. It works really good. I think that they're, with the right combination of stuff that they've run, I think it's 530 or 540. So it works good. Have you ever got pissed off during your build and used JB Weld? We have used JB Weld to seal stuff before. What would you consider to be the most you could do to a motor while it's still being the stock bottom end? The stock bottom end to me, and I'm not really concerned with what other people think about that. To me, it's that we use all the stock parts. So it had the stock block, stock crank, stock rods, stock pistons, stock rings, which we add gap to. And then and I think on the Big Bang motors, we also reuse the stock like timing chains and the lifters and stuff. So all of that stuff is stock. A lot of guys want to have unopened motors for what, I don't get involved in all of that. If you're going to do a turbo motor and you're going to try to turn the boost up like we did, you have to put ring gap in it. If you're going to say, oh, well, the motor's got to be untouched, you just got to put it up there and run it for the most it will be. That's just dumb. I mean, you're not going to be able to run very much power because you're going to break a ring land. That's what's going to happen. And in the factory pistons, which we didn't know which turned out on the Gen 3 stuff, it seems to be a rod. We don't know yet on the Gen 4 because I haven't really broken one of those. Rusco, check your link bar lifters. We've had problems with the small block Fords with the link bar lifter coming out where it oils. So it allows basically the oiling that's provided to the lifter. There's a passage that runs through there. And if there's a slot in the lifter, and if that gets uncovered, then it allows oil to just pump out past the lifter. You can do that by taking the intake manifold off and taking the distributor out, which you have to do to take the intake manifold off anyway, and spinning it with a drill. We just use a primer, and you could see if the lifter comes out too far and it's just blowing oil out. Richard, do you ever watch Street Racing Channel? I don't think so. Try to tune a Ford probe with the TFI system. It won't start if timing is out of range. $65 Musi, you can run 10 pounds on a 302. We've done that before. Doing it on pump gas, you're going to have fairly limited timing in it, but it will still work. What are some quick bolt-ons for my 2002 4200? Almost nothing. You're going to have to do air intakes and catback exhaust. The header doesn't seem to do anything. Boost is a good bolt-on. Is it perfectly fine to install wideband on one side of a 350? That's how we normally tune on the dyno. Sometimes we'll swap it just to make sure that they're the same, but we almost always run the wideband on one side. I don't know about the test schedule yet, Mark. I heard Dave Vizard is going to do some prototype 6-cylinder engine after the exhaust stroke. He wants to spray water and have it used for a power stroke and get like 100 miles per gallon in a Geo Metro. Well, that would be interesting. Charger versus a turbo. You take a look at any of the videos on a centrifugal blower versus a turbo, and you can see what they do. I have those videos up. The ProCharger does exactly the same thing. It will make more power than a Torque Storm does, but if you take a look at the one that I did with the Vortec, you'll get similar things. A centrifugal blower has a rising boost curve, so down at 2,000 or 3,000 RPM, it may only have a couple of pounds of boost. Whatever its peak boost is going to be at whatever peak RPM you're running in that. Whereas the turbo, if you have the controller set up right, let's say that you have them both set up for 10 pounds, the ProCharger will have 10 pounds at 6,500 RPM if that's how high you're revving it. But the turbo will have 10 pounds from 3,500 to 6,500. So it will make a lot more average power than a ProCharger will. How much extra ring gap? We normally, on a 4-inch bore, well, on anything, I normally set it in the 28 to 30 thousandths gap range. Is anyone else having video drop out? Yeah, the signal here is not great. Brody, 28 to 30 on your 6-liter. Internal combustion steam engine. That'll be interesting. Could you give your opinion on free valves? I haven't read up enough on them. I mean, I think it's a good idea, but I think it's right now it's fairly limited in how many people are going to have access to it. Jeremy has a 2011 6-liter with a sloppy stage 2. I'm going to put it in an S10 or a C10. If you could pick one turbo, what would it be? You just pick your turbo based on your power output. If you want 700 horsepower, you pick a GT45-ish turbo, the clone, or 1,000 horsepower, you pick a VS Racing 7875, S475. There's lots of choices. So whatever turbo that you want, how much ever power you want, you pick your turbo to get that. And on a 6-liter, like 4-digit power levels will be fairly easy. And the nice thing on the 6-liter, if you pick an S475 or S480, that size turbo, it's also going to be fairly responsive on a cam 6-liter. Myrtle Beach, you should put ring gap in it just in case you end up adding some sort of power adder, whether it's a turbo or a blower or nitrous. And if you add ring gap to it, it's not going to hurt you. Yeah, let me know what happens if that's it. That's only a suggestion. We have just seen that on some Ford applications. How much ring gap for 75 psi? It's the same. It doesn't matter. The boost doesn't care about ring gap. I don't know why 6,500 RPM would be the rev limit for your link bar lifters unless they're excessively heavy. Link bar lifters are what people use on solid roller stuff that goes to 9,500. So I don't know why the link bar itself would be a problem. For the 454 big block, will it be a blow-through carb? Probably not. It will probably be EFI, only because I want to make sure that we have even distribution to all the cylinders. So Admiral, you might have to, if you have too much gap, you might have to add a little oil. But if you don't have enough, you have to add motor to your oil. That's good. What is a safe number for cylinder pressure on a stock block Chevy? I'm running about 205 psi, 13.7. If you're talking about cranking compression, there's not a direct correlation there, because you can get cranking compression a number of different ways by having a really tiny camshaft in it and a lot of static compression. But that doesn't really mean anything. It's going to mean you're not going to make power, because that's a bad combination. Does it matter which cylinder the wideband is read from? We like to have it in a collector, so it's taking an average of 4. And a lot of times when we're doing individual cylinder tuning, we have it in all of them. If you assume that all of them are the same, if you have a single plane manifold, I can almost guarantee you that they're not. So let's get down to the end here. Jay, when opening up a ring gap on a L76 6-liter, how much of a concern is it that the ring is at 35 thousandths compared to the others at 30? I wouldn't worry about it at all. We ran lots of the big bang motors that were at least 35 thousandths. I mean, I don't think that that's where I'd set it if I didn't make a mistake, but I'm not going to stop from doing what I was doing. We put it in there anyway and ran it. Do you realize that this is video number 602? Man, I should have celebrated at 600, right? I guess I'm going to have to do something when we hit 1,000, right? How much power do you think a stock 5-liter GT40 heads, GT40 upper and lower, and a 274 cam makes? I think that makes less than 350. Yeah, probably less than 350. What compression ratio would you run on a big block 496 with a Borgwarner S480 on California pump gas? It depends on how much boost you want to run. An S480 is going to be like 11 or 1200 if you want to run. I don't know if you want to. I doubt you're going to turn that all the way up on pump gas. I wouldn't recommend it. Since it's a 496, it's going to have plenty of low speed power. You could run it around fairly safely on like 9-to-1. If you want it to be more responsive, make it 10-to-1, which is normally where we run them on the dyno. But we're running them cold and everything is in perfect condition. And so if you're driving them around on the street, chances are they're probably not. They're not getting the very cold charge air delivered to the turbo unless you have dedicated cold air setup. It's not running at the temperature that we run these motors at. The temperature is going to be running hotter. So you can make your life a little bit better and give yourself a bigger tuning window if you make it 9-to-1 instead of 10-to-1. How far are you going to take the Turbo Atlas build? I'd actually like to do a dedicated build with forged internals as well, and a ported head and cams and all kinds of stuff. Speaking of ring gap, wonder how well total seal gapless rings. I've never tried them on a boosted motor. I'd like running twins on my inline 6-cylinder BMW, but it's been a lot of torque on the rods. Is there anything that can help this remedy? You can run bigger turbos and reduce the torque output, and then just have it all come on at the top. What's your experience with dry sump oil systems? Your Z06 is not really a dry sump oil system. It's not a true one. It's kind of an external wet sump. But the dry sump, there's a lot of good ones out there. Aviad, and there's a few people that make them. I've never put one on an LS motor though. What would you stroke a 400 small block to? I don't think I would. You're going to start running into problems. And I don't know why you'd need to go bigger than that. Yes, there is a way to calculate dynamic compression. All you have to do is do a search for dynamic compression. They show you exactly how to do it. But the question you have to ask yourself after you calculate that is, what does that mean? Does it mean anything? Best Ford bottom end for 1,000 horsepower with liability being important. A forged one would be the most reliable one. How much does TFI modulate timing? Your computer should control that. The issue, Noodles, the issue with BMW and similar motors is that the turbos are set up for immediate response. Any kind of factory application is going to be like that. Like my Sprint was like that. It had good turbo response. All of the VWs, I mean, almost any factory turbo combination that you run is going to be like that. What they want is the motor to feel like a big naturally aspirated motor. So it has, what they normally do is have a lot of boost initially, and then they have a falling boost curve, so the motor feels like really strong and pulls out enough to where it has enough horsepower too. But the response rate, to get that kind of response rate, they have to size the turbos so that they do what they're supposed to do. The problem is that they don't have a bunch of extra capacity to continue to make more power if you just want to turn them up. Can you do a no parasitic loss small block build? I don't know what that is. Or build it to LS standard. I don't know what the difference between a small block build and an LS build would be. Let's see, Mark. Where did you go, Mark? Where did you go? My 4200 was run on 100% methanol a few years ago. End result is a contaminated secondary fuel system. The methanol dried out and left white sand throughout. We've seen some of that, some of those deposits on E85 also. Do you have a favorite brand of spark plug? Not really. We try a bunch of stuff. We have, I've run Denzos on a lot of stuff. We've run the NGKs on a lot of stuff. All right, John, take it easy, man. Can you do more 4.6 liter double overhead cam stuff? I haven't seen their intake manifold from MMR. Do you ever mess around with Briggs and Stratton? No, but Nick from Clay Smith, I've seen some of the stuff that he does, and it's pretty amazing. Chris, my email is in the chat, but I'll put it in again. So if you have questions on your 351 408 build, what do you think compression ratio is on a 5.3 with 30 over milled 79 heads and LS9 gaskets? Braxton, I'm going to introduce you to something that you need to use all the time. It's called Wallace compression ratio calculator or Wallace displacement calculator. And actually, Wallace has a ton of calculators. Do a search for Wallace, W-A-L-L-A-C-E, compression calculator. If you do a search for that, it will come up, and all you have to do is plug in your information, and it'll tell you exactly what your compression is. It's awesome. The 5.4 and 4.6 are far more common than the Coyotes. So you should have no problem finding them. I have seen some of them. I don't see 4.6.4 valves very often in the junkyard. I do see 5.4.4 valves. I see Navigator motors fairly often. I have seen some what are they, Aviator motors in the junkyard as well. I don't see any like Mustang ones. Jeremy, you do want a colder plug. We run an 8, 9, or even a 10 sometimes if we're running high boost stuff. What kind of parts comparison videos do you have in the works? I don't know. I'm not even sure what my next video will be. I'm going to decide. But I want to get down, so I need to go down, and I will do that this week. I'm going to go down and pick up the Barras that I have waiting for me, and we need to take a look at those and see what I need to get those running. I want to get the 4200 stuff back, and I just need to get down and see my buddy Steve at West Tech and see all the guys down there. I got an email from somebody, and I forgot your name. I'm sorry. He sent me information on how to set up a Holly on the 3800. So I sent all that information to Eric at West Tech, and he says he thinks it will work. So that would make life a lot easier for us, so we could be able to get that 3800 up on the dyno fairly quickly. I want to run some 4200 stuff. We want to run the 05 head, the 06 head, the 05 cams, the 06 cams. We're going to run boost on all of this. I have the head studs are already there. We have valve springs on their way if they're not there already. Have you run any twin turbo 460 big block forwards? No, I don't think I've run any turbo big block forwards yet. Do you mess around with lawnmower or two-stroke weed eater stuff? No, I do have a GoPed though, if that counts. And we did put a pipe on it, or one of them that we had way back when I was road racing. We put a pipe on it, worked really good. And we did some The test that I did, the back-to-back test I did on the GoPed, was that we ran it with an inductive pickup on it to find out how much RPM the motor was running while we were doing our, tucked for our aero top speed test that we were doing on our GoPed. And then we put the pipe on it and then did our aero speed test. And we were basically clocking it with an inductive pickup. I think it was a fluke meter or something back in the day, because we wanted to see how much more RPM we got out of it so we could estimate how much power it was making or how much more speed we got or whatever. So we did that, and I did a video. I think I did a video, or not a video. I did a magazine story for Splash magazine back then on the GoPed, which was awesome. What's the most horsepower you can squeeze out of a 3.8 liter V6? Just try to get, take the V6 and put a turbo on it and run it at 7 or 8 pounds and see how much you like it. You'll like it a lot. Forget about the most thing. Let's see. How does lobe separation and lift on a camshaft change torque and horsepower? You can't individualize the parts. You got to look at the whole camshaft. LSA tends to, if you widen it out, it tends to lose power down low and add power at the top, kind of. Let's see. 5.3 LS with a 3.3 stroker kit, pushing the limit. I have a 5.3 block in my garage. No idea what route to take. I want to go as far as possible without boost. Yeah, then no, a 383 is fine if you're going to do it NA. That will work good. Any ballpark for the RPM you think the 4200 valve train will handle with springs? I think it'll handle a lot of RPM. That's not, according to Mark, that's not the problem. The problem is the damper with the 4200 and not the valve train. Junior dragsters run the Briggs stuff, yes. What is max horsepower 488 an S480 can support? It depends on which one, but I think around 11 or 1200 probably. Any Ford 2.3 single overhead cam turbos? I've run a bunch of stuff back in the day on the chassis dyno with the guys with Dave from Tiny Avenger on his SVO turbo motor. And I've run those turbos a lot on Honda applications because we used to go get them from the wrecking yard and put them on Honda stuff. So I did a test where we compared with my buddy Steve from Powertrain Dynamics. We ran a B16 Honda, and I ran it with the little T3 turbos probably from a T-Bird. And then we ran it with 3 different ARs, a 48, a 63, and an 82. Aaron, Richard, will all be okay running a 98 thousandths head gasket with boost? I've never run any that thick, but Kazi ran a 300 thousandths head gasket and it worked on Engine Masters, so I think that probably will be okay. What's dimple porting? Yeah, that's the little golf ball indentations. Have you done any best brand supercharger shootout? There's no best. They're different. All of them are different. Roots is different than twin screw, and twin screw is different than centrifugal, and those are all different than turbos. I have a video up where we tested all of them at the same boost and same air fuel and same timing and kind of see what they all do. And a Roots will give you more low-speed power, and then a centrifugal will usually give you more top-end power. Again, it's going to depend a lot on how you size those turbos. I have some info from DIY AutoTune for you. We'll send this. What's the info, Mark? What did they need to send me? Really old video on YouTube where a guy races a WS6 with an 11-second nitrous. He scored 2 sets of 781 heads on Friday while somebody was drinking with his wife. Yes, guilty as charged. When you do it, That's a good question. I don't know. I wouldn't think so. I would think that the base circles would be the same, but I'd have to check with Brian. It would be interesting to look at different fuels. I've run fuel tests before and seen no power. We're running them on motors that don't need the extra octane. So when we run like, 114 and 112 and 100 and 91, if we can put all of the timing in it with 91, then the extra octane doesn't seem to add any power. Would you go with an M90 or a turbo on a V6 Mustang? Either of those will work. The turbo will make more power. Any experience with a 363 stroker kit? Stock bore and big stroke. You can do that if you're talking about a 5.3 and you put a 4-inch stroke in it and leave the bore size the same. You can do that. Is there a turbo kit that will fit a Foxbury where I don't have to cut the bumpers apart? I don't know. I don't normally test kits on parts or the kits on actual combinations. Two more minutes. Have not done any V10 stuff. I would like to do the V10 Ford. Would probably be the first one that I would do. DIY has a request for data, Mark. Okay. Just let me know what they want. We'll see if we have it. I'm running 93 octane in a turbocharged D16. How much timing should I expect to pull per pound of boost? It depends. It depends on a lot of stuff. Is the thing intercooled? Is it stock? What is the air temperature going into the turbo? What is the ultimate air temperature coming out of the turbo? I'm hoping that it's intercooled. The amount of timing that you run is going to vary with a lot of those things. Aftermarket L31 heads. Do you want to stay with a Vortec head? Or do you want to put a conventional head on it and then put a conventional intake manifold on it? And then I would recommend TrickFlow or Airflow Research or Dart. There's a lot of good small block Chevy heads. The LQ9 is a good motor. Do you think that 91 E10 will outperform normal 91? Maybe it would. Since we see from E85, and we see gains all the way down to, I think that the lowest we've run is like E50. And there's power to be had there on a turbo motor, but I don't see gains on an NA motor. So if they think you run that test on an NA motor, you might not see anything. Richard, would you be willing to test out Pulsar's pulse plugs? Project Farm also gave them a test. I don't think we've tested lots of different kinds of plugs, and I've never seen any power from a spark plug that didn't otherwise cure a misfire problem. Like if there was a misfire from the setup for whatever reason, you had 100 thousandths plug gap on it, and then you put these plugs in and they only had 30 thousandths plug gap on it, and it cured the misfire, then you see power. I don't know how you see more power from a plug if the plug is firing correctly. And we've tried E3s and split fire, you name any kind of fancy side gap, all of these things. And I just haven't seen it on the dyno. Top Gun Raceway. Darwin, you can only run what you can run. You can run boost on, like we have 91 here in California. So if somebody has a race car and they're running pump gas in it, you can do that. You just have to limit timing and ultimately limit boost. Is drilling and pinning rocker studs still a budget thing? I don't think I've done that. Karen, I like I said, and the guys at West Tech have been through this too. They've had people ask them many times, like, "Hey, can you test these plugs on? We want to show that they make more power." And they're like, "We can test them. That's all that we can do." And like I said, I've yet to see an instance where when all you change without doing anything else, when all you change is the spark plug, I've yet to see one make more power. Like I said, unless it cured a misfire. So there has to be a pre-existing condition for that to happen. I haven't seen it. I'm not saying it can't. I'm not saying there's not some super fancy technology that I don't understand that's going to make that work and make it better, but I just haven't seen it yet. What's the plug gap on the 4.3? When we run boosted anything, we run plug gap down around 19. Yes, excuse me. I've tested the Jacobs ignitions. The thing that I loved about the Jacobs ignitions was not the ignitions themselves, is that when they used to come around to all the pressurized environment and how the spark ante would jump so much farther with the Jacobs setup than stock ignitions. Have you tested different LS coils? I have not. We've run different sets of them and had the same results. Like we've tested the truck ones and then I think the LS3 ones, but I've never set up a dedicated test to find out again at what point is one coil not going to work more than the others. One thing I can tell you is that the being able to adjust the dwell time has a dramatic effect on that. If we can't adjust that up to where it needs to be, we can definitely get misfire, especially on turbo applications. Aim for the hedges. This is the other guys. Granatelli wires. I haven't tested those. Okay, last question. Somebody get a good one. Plug wires are a lot like the spark plugs. Again, unless the plug wire that you're testing it against is cracked or broke or burnt. And I don't know how you'd have one that had so much restriction that it would cause a problem, but I've never seen anything with plug wires either. Ever run boost on a Tripower? I have not done that. That will be our last question. Thank you guys all for showing up. I have to get going. I got to figure out what my next video is for tomorrow. Thank you guys all for showing up. Hope you guys had a great weekend. I did. It was awesome. I got to do the live feed with Lisa, which is always great. And then I got to put up a couple cool videos. So I'm excited about next week. Hopefully I can get down and see my buddies down at West Tech. I definitely am excited about picking up the Bearer engine. So I'll probably do a video on that and find out what's going on. Make sure I can get the 4200 stuff back together and do some testing. I'm going to send some cams over to the guys at Schneider so they can regrind those. And then hopefully we can get, I'm going to have to work on, if anybody knows somebody that can do a ported head, I need to get a head ported. So I want to get that done. So, because I want to compare a stock head to a ported head, and the one that I want to port is going to be an 06 head. So let me know if you know of anybody that can, that does good porting. I would want to do some before and after airflow numbers on the flow bench of the 4200 head, which we're going to test. I want to compare the 05 and the 06, and we'll test both the intake and the exhaust sides to see what's going on. So thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow. do 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 do.